You ever not pick up an author for the dumbest possible reason? Well, for I couldn't tell you how long, I kept getting Elizabeth Moon and Elizabeth Bear mixed up, and I read an Elizabeth Bear book that I really didn't care for, and so didn't pick up any Elizabeth Moon, realizing that they are entirely different people. I'm really glad I finally picked this one up. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about the first book in the Deed of Paxonarian, Sheepfarmer's Daughter by Elizabeth Moon. That's right, Elizabeth Moon. It really helps, at least for me, if you get the name right. And I mean, like, it's not like there aren't other authors that have the same first name. No idea why I was so confused, but hey, there it is. Sheepfarmer's Daughter was the book that we had for our Backlist Book Club pick for the month of February. And I will note too that hey, if you haven't joined in Backlist Book Club, we have a ton left. We are doing Dragon Prince by Melanie Ron in March, and then The Wall by Marlon Haushofer in uh, April. I forgot what month came next for a second there, but so definitely check it out. But I was so excited to finally get to this one. This is one that Athena suggested for the list, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I've seen this one around, and I think that's when I first realized my whole mix-up with the authors because I did in fact want to read this, and this was a really interesting read. Now, I didn't know a ton about this one. It's called Sheep Farmer's Daughter. I knew it's about someone who is a sheep farmer's daughter and then goes off to end up, trying to like do something, but I didn't know a whole lot more. And so this kind of surprised me with how very much military fantasy this is. Our main character, Paxonarian, or Pox for short, goes off, runs away because she doesn't want to get married, and joins a mercenary company, and then the rest of the book is really her kind of going through that. So we have the periods going through training, and then we have some periods of action and some other things. But the most impressive thing, and the thing that stands out the most, I think, for me, is how well the author just seems to capture the sort of day-to-day feel of what that would be like. And I've heard lots of things commented, whether it's books or just people talking, that when you're in even if like you're deployed or something, oftentimes it's in military stuff, it's not like it's constant action battles, fighting, marching, whatever. A lot of it's just hanging out, boredom, or doing some basic monotonous stuff. Then suddenly you'll have very intense bits of action, and I feel like the author captured that really well. There are a lot of parts where I don't want to say slow because this feels like it moves very quickly, and I don't want to say boring because it's quite engaging, but there are like the quiet moments. They're the moments where it's just they're going through training or they're doing sort of the day-to-day routine, and Elizabeth Moon manages to capture that without ever making it feel like, oh, I want something to happen, because there's always things going on. It's just sometimes it's quieter, and then very suddenly there'll be more actiony things. And there were several times throughout where it's just kind of like, oh, normal day, character goes to sleep, and then suddenly something's happening. And I think the way it does that, it gets across that more that military feel. And this just has to be, as far as like just really well done military fantasy. It's not something like I've read a ton of by any means, but this is definitely, I feel like, up there. It's just with what it's trying to accomplish, I think it does really well in it getting that day to day. And it's also something that with the main character of Pox as well, I never for a second felt like any time that she like improves with fighting or does this or that or any of the stuff set up, it never felt like it was out of place or didn't make sense because everything felt earned, or it was shown kind of that why she thinks the way that she is. And I think it's going to set her up for success later. But again, just the growth of the character felt so organic and natural as we were going along with how the story progressed, and I also really appreciated that. It's really easy to do, and there's lots of tropes where it's like the young inexperienced person goes and they're just amazing at everything and they just shoot to the top. We don't really see that here. We see just a character who is, that she's quite, large, and she's tall and strong from working on a farm, but is otherwise, doesn't have experience, and so is learning and just kind of going through those types of things. And as we go along too, learning more about fighting and just thinking about things and how she applies the things that she learns about being a mercenary, about being a soldier, about fighting, and all of these other things, because she starts a little bit naive naturally, and as she learns about the world, we find out a bit more too. And I think it works quite well. And I was just really impressed with how those items were handled, and just with other things as well too, getting like the sort of the feel of this happening, because there are it's not like it's not even I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, because like there are, you'll see characters die and people die because, you know, there's fighting, there's battle, and that's just the way it goes. And sort of the way that that's explained in the narrative, where it's our characters learning what it's like to maybe go into a battle and, you know, a friend or a comrade doesn't come back alive, and that's not something that she thought about, and also has to deal with, you know, killing and things like that for the first time. So a lot of those just basic things, it's, again, it's not like I've never read anything where that's done or that's talked about, but everything here just felt so real that I think it really pulled me in even more and just made it more engaging and just feel like it really flowed so well. I did look it up. The author apparently was in the military. It said as a computer specialist, but whether through her own experience or experience that she's, you know, talked about with other people as well too, it just, this feels like it's somebody who's lived the life that they're now writing about, at least to some extent, because it just feels very real and organic. And I know it's fantasy; it doesn't necessarily have to feel real, but when you have that level of authenticity, it just makes it so much better. And that's where, like, I love the authors who like actually do the research, understand the things they're writing about, whether it's details about ships or horses or whatever it happens to be. It's just, there's always, I feel like, a difference in the author that really knows what they're talking about versus the one that's just kind of throwing stuff there. And it's something that I appreciate that level of detail being there, and that's really really strong here. So I enjoyed that aspect a lot. There's two other big things that I want to talk about. The first one does plan with the realism, and that is, and this is something too where it's more of like just to be aware of. I'm not going to give it in the specific details. It also happens within the first 5 chapters, so it's quite early on. But this is a story about a young woman who joins a mercenary company that does accept women, but they're, you know, largely men. And so the thing that you might expect happens, where there's generally, like, you know, an assault, and so it doesn't really happen on screen, but there are several chapters that are dealing with what's happened in the aftermath. And it was, I think, challenging to read, partially because of the fact that the way it was handled, the way different people reacted to it, whether our main character or other characters, felt so realistic, and that's what made it kind of difficult. And it's something that I think the author wanted to make sure that it was there, and that you're understanding it and that you're seeing it, and having that level of realism, but then also you don't really have that in the rest of the book either. So it's not like it's just we're throwing stuff like that in left and right. And I've seen other books that do that, where it's just that's a constant thing that happens, but it's something that's there. It is dealt with, and it's I the way that it's handled, I think it's handled really well. But it's also it is one of those things where when you're seeing how people react to it, it feels a little bit too real. So that might be something that is upsetting to some people. Like I said, I found it just frustrating too, because it's just like it, you could absolutely see it happening like that in the real world as well. And it's just, it's well handled by the author, but it's one of those things to be aware of. So that is there. But the other thing, which is different and a little bit unexpected, honestly, especially with this being the 80s, but the character does appear again. I'm not considering this a spoiler; it's a smaller detail. But the character does appear to be asexual. The main character, Pox, and that's sort of the setup. She doesn't want to get married, and she says that she doesn't want to marry anybody. It's not about anything. And she's asked super early on too, like, "Oh, well, do you just like women?" And she's like, "No, I don't like anybody." Um, and that appears to actually be staying. And that for me was interesting, because I don't feel like I've read a lot of things with asexual main characters, but as somebody who doesn't really care for sexual content in my books, I'm like, maybe I need to read more books with asexual main characters, because just not having any of that, not having like the POV thoughts. Now, you still have plenty of characters who are interested, so you still have some of that. It's not like it's completely devoid of it, but not having anything like that from the POV, I found really refreshing, just because that's one of those things that's more, you know, a quirk of my taste. I know most people don't care, and as long as it's not like over the top or constant, I don't mind terribly. Like it's there's, you know, sexual content in the vast majority of books, I feel like, unless they're for a younger audience, so you get something to some degree. But it was really interesting, again, just that never enters into the equation of the character. The character's not thinking about like if they're attracted to somebody or things like that. It's just, it's not there, and I found that really interesting. And it also, I think, played into just the feel of, you know, we're really just focusing on what's happening, and that's the character's just focusing on being the mercenary that she is, learning, training, those types of things. And so you don't have the normal thing, because I feel like you always have that, whether whatever gender the character is, in the training, we're like, oh, but there's distracted because they're like, you know, cute whoever over there. And so not having that for me, I found I liked more. But I'm just curious because again, I know that there's a little bit more focus sometimes, and people talk about in books more, they try to do diverse different viewpoints, whether it's sexuality or whatever. And so but just to see that, and it's not like it's a huge focus, but it is quite clearly stated early on, and doesn't it's not like she's like, oh, but now I found somebody. It's just like, nope. And I don't know if it's going to continue in the rest of the series, or if it is going to reverse a little bit, but I hope it does, just because I think for one, it just makes it more interesting, and it adds something to a type of POV I don't have a lot of experience reading, and so I find it interesting there. But just in general, it was kind of refreshing for me, like I said. So that might be something that if you're somebody who really likes that kind of stuff, maybe you won't like this. It'd be interesting to know differing thoughts there, but I found that really interesting as well. And so those are the other two things that I really wanted to mention here. So those really are overall my thoughts on this. It's really well done military fantasy. It is kind of focusing on the character, but it flows very well. It felt very fast paced, very easy to get through, and just the feeling of sort of like being in there with the character in the day to day, and the sort of focused, almost like in a blinders on, this is what we're doing, was interesting. And you do get a little bit less world building here, but so then it almost made me appreciate the little nuggets of world building all the more, because I wasn't getting as many. So instead of being like, I just want to know more about the world, I'm like, ooh, I'm engaged in what's happening, and there's little tidbits about the world as well too. So it was interesting. And because of the fact that I am such a world building focused reader, this isn't like, like, oh, I love this book so much or anything like that. I don't think this is likely going to end up being, a favorite series by any means. But it's really well done. I really enjoyed it, and it has me intrigued to try the rest of the series as well as more of this author in general. So still pretty successful overall. But I would be curious on your thoughts, because I've just not really heard a ton about this. I've seen this around a little bit, and it's kind of the whole idea with the Backlist Book Club is getting some of these books and series that maybe like were well known at the time but aren't talked about a whole lot, older series by female authors, and I had a great time with the vast majority of them so far, and this one is definitely included in there as well. So let me know if you've read this, or you're interested to read this, or your thoughts on any of the stuff that I said. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description as always for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.